So Danny and Nicky Cowley lasted about 10 months at Huddersfield Town. Relieved of their duties was the official line yesterday from the club. Nothing really surprises me in the game anymore, but I have to say I didn't really see it coming. But I shouldn't be surprised because the game is this way inclined so often these days. None of us, or very few of us, will be privy to the reasons, the specific kind of contributory factors why the decision was made. But I am 100% certain that the Cowleys will move on and continue to be successful wherever they go. I am not impartial on the subject of the Cowley Brothers. Anyone who knows me or has ever heard me speak about the game will know that I'm a massive fan. I admire them as coaches, as managers, as leaders, as people. And I think that any chairman out there would be well served in spending some time trying to get in touch with their representatives to at least find out a little bit more about them, because I just think that they're phenomenal managers, and I think their record backs that up. So in terms of the job that they did at Huddersfield, they inherited a group that was malfunctional, to be honest, really disjointed, had seen off 2 managers, so there was really poor culture in the dressing room, a group that was not balanced in terms of the playing staff and covering the right areas of the pitch. In December, I think they went quite some time without a natural left-sided player in the kind of defensive and midfield areas, so they had to kind of make do with right-footed players in that area, and opponents targeted them as a result. And you can't run a club at any level of football or many levels of football without having natural left-sided players in there. It closes off the pitch when you have a right-sided player there, both from an attacking and a defensive point of view. The balance just isn't there. If you think about it practically, when a left-back receives the ball, naturally, if they can open their body out and use the left foot to play down the line and to use that part of the pitch that's in front of them, it gives you many more attacking options and passing lines. Whereas a right-footed player will always naturally look to go inside and to play balls, straight into central areas, or switch play again back into the areas that the ball has just come from. It's just the way it works, and to have such an imbalanced squad was really poor. But more so that they had to deal with the difficulties of certain characters and of culture that had been set and not been addressed properly. They hadn't won for something like 18 months on a Saturday, and they were just they were just dysfunctional, not achieving anything, not getting anywhere near the levels, both physically or from a technical point of view and the execution side of things, that a team with the quality of players, with the amount of money that they'd spent on some of the players in there, and frankly they'd probably just had some bad apples in there, and they needed to address that quickly. In terms of the club infrastructure, I don't think it was too bad. The club had been in the Premier League for 2 years previous to that, so it was a step up for them. It was always going to be a step up for them into the Championship anyway, but it was a step up in terms of the infrastructure and the quality of the club and the facilities for them, given where they've been to this point in their careers. But they had a big job on their hands. They effected immediate change. They lost 2 games, and then I think they took over, had 2-3 days to prepare for Sheffield Wednesday. They lost that. They lost the second game, but then from the 3rd game onwards, they went on to consistently get results. Getting late points here and there. Eking out draws. Gradually started to find ways to win and to score goals, and the form table after they left would suggest, I think, that they would have finished 9th, which, with the squad that they'd inherited, with the lack of funds that they had, with the fact that they took over and had to change so much mid-season, really underlines the fact, or the opinion that I have, which is that they did an excellent job, and a job that very, very few managers would have been able to do. The transfer window in January was really important, and I think a lot of Huddersfield fans, and bear in mind I haven't seen games live, I've spoken to people who've been at games, I've watched games myself on the television, but I'm not privy to, I haven't seen everything. But the fans that I've spoken to and the people that I've spoken to in the game who know a little bit more about it than I do, or have seen more than I have said that the transfer window was really good business from the Cowleys, and just underlined the type of people that they are. They worked hard to identify the right kind of characters and targets, brought them in, and the changes that they made had a big impact on the second part of the season, the results, as well as just some of the standards. So the likes of Andy King and Richard Stearman brought in a level of commitment and the right kind of mentality and attitude that perhaps was sadly lacking for them in the early part of the season and probably last season as well. But also getting Smith Rowe in demonstrated that the top clubs really trust Danny Cowley and Nicky Cowley to look after their players. Their level of pastoral care, having been teachers for young players, young developing players, is really, really good. But not just that, they're great coaches, they're great managers, they're great organisers, great communicators, and they understand how to physically and mentally support young players in their development towards the top of the game. And that's not something that can be said for every manager, I can guarantee you. Their work ethic stands out and continues to stand out as, for me, actually, it's almost the biggest differentiator between them and a lot of their peers. I listened to a podcast last night that suggested that the people at the Manor House Hotel in Lindley in Huddersfield were expecting and regularly saw the Cowley Brothers come in their tracksuits at 10:30, 11 at night and leave early in the morning. And they are the hardest workers in the room. There are a lot of managers in the game. Most managers are very, very hard workers. Most managers and coaches are obsessive about the game. They love the game and they're obsessive about it. And that usually breeds a work ethic that's beyond perhaps what you might see in other industries. But these guys take it to another level. 80, 90 hours. Their families were still in Lincoln, which, whilst it would have been difficult for them from a family point of view, I think that they realised that they had to focus on the job at hand because it was such a big job and such a big undertaking. So they spent a lot of time, as they did in the early days at Lincoln, in each other's company rather than with their families. You can guarantee that they weren't sticking on Netflix and ordering a pizza at the time that they were sat in the hotel rooms. And the level of commitment that they demonstrate to their job, to their club, to their team, to their players is just beyond what I've experienced or understand about other managers' habits. I can guarantee from personal experience, I've seen managers training grounds let the players go at 12:30, 1 o'clock after an hour and a half of training or whatever in the morning and a bit of prehab and maybe a little bit of stretching afterwards. And the Cowleys demand more from their players, which is great, because I think as a supporter, I would like to see the players that are paid the big bucks that I watch every week. I'd like to see them making use of the time as all of us have to do in our daily jobs, not just working 3 or 4 hours a day. And I think they demand that, but they demand that, and they're able to demand that because of their own work ethic. I've seen other managers, off to play golf at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I just don't think that's in their makeup. And that should be a reassuring factor for chairmen, for players, for supporters of clubs, where they may well end up, because that's what these guys do. They work, and they're obsessive about it. And it's been a recipe for success and will continue to be, I'm certain. They made mistakes, of course. They're far from perfect. They're inexperienced at the championship level, and they were learning on the job. But I think they backed themselves, and rightly so, given their record, their relentless record of success, frankly, in the game from the 9th level of English football up to the 2nd tier so far. Their style of football is the biggest sticking point for people who like to criticise them. Partly that stems from having Matt Reed and John Akinde at Lincoln, but they also work with some very good technical players at those clubs, the likes of Adam Marriott, Nathan Arnold, Sam Havigan, Alex Woodyard. They've developed players and sold them on for big money. So I just don't buy into the fact that they only have a very direct and boring style of play. The way I interpret it, they lock up the back door first. They make sure that they keep clean sheets. They make sure that they're very organised, and for me, that might have been one of the reasons why Huddersfield Town is still a championship club, because they managed to keep, I think, 4 clean sheets in the last 6 games, which is an incredible achievement when you consider, the pressure that they were under and the teams that they were playing against. So, they might not have been creating chances. I get that people want to be entertained, but I don't think the need to entertain fans is right at the top of the Cowley's priority list, to be honest. They crave success. And they hope that their fans and the clubs that they work for crave success too. And if success comes as a result of their methods, and their methods not necessarily incorporating, the most technically beautiful football, then so be it. In their opinion, if you gave them two options, one to play really nice, attractive football, but to be around the relegation zone, or one to be playing more direct, more organised, more functional football, but to be challenging for the league title, they would go for that in a heartbeat. And I would expect most fans would want that as well, but perhaps I'm wrong, I don't know. One thing I can say is that I've heard Pep Guardiola getting absolute pelters recently about his style of football from, you know, admittedly armchair critics with a can of beer and Sky Sports on their remote control probably. I've heard Pochettino get hammered for being too physical and too athletic and focusing too much on that rather than playing good football and being able to adapt. I've heard the likes of, you know, Frank Lampard get absolutely hammered in the early days, and yet he's doing a fantastic job. I've heard Ole Gunnar Solskjaer get hammered, and perhaps rightly so, I don't know. Of course, the usual suspects of Tony Pulis and Sam Allardyce, Neil Warnock, David Moyes, Sean Dyche, these kind of managers get massive criticism for their style of play. But, you know, most of it, to be honest, just washes over them, because they all crave the same thing, and that's to get the very best out of their players, and to do the best for their football clubs. And for me, that is what Danny Cowley and Nicky Cowley did at Huddersfield Town. I think in time, Huddersfield fans, and I think the chairman most importantly, may well look back and realise that he didn't just do a good job, he did a great job for them in very difficult circumstances. You can't compete in the Championship with a tiny budget, or a small budget, let's say, you know, limit the funds. You can't compete for sustained periods of time doing that. It's not possible. You have to have good players in there. Danny Cowley will be the first to admit that he needs good players to be a successful manager. And Huddersfield Town had some okay players, had some good, probably technically very good players, but probably not the right characters, and that's the challenge. It's always the challenge, and I think if you've got the right characters in the dressing room, it can take you an awful long way. They've certainly had the right leader. I think he got a lot of the fans on side. I think a lot of the fans really warmed to him, despite the fact it was a completely alien and new culture for him, in some respects anyway, in terms of geography. I have some people very dear to me who are Huddersfield fans, and I hope for their sake that Huddersfield Town recover from another setback, which is what I think this is, and that they get someone in and they start to be successful soon, because if they continue down this route, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to compete anywhere near the top end of the Championship, and the likelihood is that they'll perhaps be looking in the other direction. But let's hope that I'm not, you know, that's not true, and that Huddersfield go on to be successful. But one thing I'm absolutely certain of is that the Cowleys will be. If I was a chairman now, as I say, I would be desperately trying to get hold of their representative and desperately trying to have a chat with them. I genuinely think they'll go up to the Premier League at some stage in their careers, and I think that they will be successful in everything that they do. Perhaps they may never end up at the very, very, very highest level, but I wouldn't count against them, because a few years ago I walked into their office and had a bit of time with them and the people that were around them, and it was very clear to me then that in the fifth level of English football they were going to go higher. They've been in the second tier and done, I think, a really, really good job, and I think that they'll thrive again. So we'll see. But as I say, I just want to state the fact that I'm far from impartial on this. I'm a huge fan of theirs. And I expect them to go on and be very successful. So let's see what happens. I think there'll be more to come out in the washing in the next few days on this one anyway. Cheers.